Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to CDE Virtual. I'm going to ask Songezo Zibi, former editor of Business Day, ABSA executive, and a CDE board member, to open our discussion this evening. Songezo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ann. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the 9th webinar in the series, which celebrates CDE's launch in August 1995, which means CDE turns 26 this year. And the exact anniversary of that is on Sunday, the 8th of August. But the board has recommended that the series continues, and we have many interesting speakers to look forward to in the future. This is testament to the value of these webinars, which continue to draw big and interesting audiences from all over South Africa and from all around the world. The list of those joining us tonight includes people from across the traditional divides in South African society, the economy, and politics, which is really encouraging to see. CDE has a reputation for speaking truth to power, and it's often commended for taking a bold and frank stand on the issues. And this is rooted in rigorous policy research, rich in facts and evidence, and also widespread engagement in South Africa with a deep network of international experts. CDE is valuable and in many ways unique in our national space that is paid for by private, corporate, and philanthropic money. It has a vitally important role to play in South Africa today and is positioned to make an impact that could be critical in helping the country emerge from our many crises. Now, today's topic is of particular interest to me because one of the challenges that we've had are the intersection between politics and public institutions. And the issue of cadre deployment has come up as a topic many a time. And I think it's quite apt that we've got today's a guest speaker, whom I am not going to name because you all know who he is, and Ann is going to introduce properly. But one of the values of research and insight and knowledge building is that we get to understand where we're going well, we get to understand what is working and what is not working and why it is not working, so that we may change course if we need to change course. And that is one of the values of a discussion, and having an esteemed guest such as who we have today. So without much further ado, I'm going to hand back to you, Ann, who will then formally introduce Mavuso Msimang and start the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Songezo. It's my great privilege to welcome Mavuso Msimang to our platform today. Mavuso has been a member of the ANC for over 60 years, some of that time in very senior positions in the organization. Today, he is chairman of Corruption Watch. He is former Director General of the Department of Home Affairs, CEO of South African National Parks, and also the State Information Technology Agency and South African Tourism. He has enormous experience in our democracy of transforming and restructuring institutions. So welcome, Mavuso, to this discussion. Let me start with my first question. What do you think happened in July this year? The terrible devastation, loss of life, chaos, looting, and just destruction of so many people's hopes. Was this an attempted insurrection? A plot to destabilize our society and in effect topple the president? What is your take on where we are now with respect to these terrible events? You're muted. You're still muted.
Thank you very much, Ann, and thanks, Songezo, and thanks to everybody who is in the meeting for the invitation to talk on a number of issues that I believe are of importance to our people at this point in time. What happened in July no sooner was, did the saboteurs get to know that Jacob Zuma had been taken to prison in escort? Then they started on what they had planned, a series of incidents, mainly blocking roads, to impede communications. You know the story about how they pulled the trucks together, burnt them, arranged the attacks on a number of infrastructure and important targets. It seemed quite clear that the intention was to embarrass government as much as possible, or to get the people to lose confidence in the government because the effect of what they did, discounting all other things that they may not have planned, was to paralyze the economy of the country and shock the nation.
Now, on the 29th of July, a week ago, you made a remarkable and I thought very strong statement, and the only one of its kind I had seen. You said that the ANC, we of the ANC, have visited upon the nation a veritable winter of despair, which led to death and destruction. It mostly punished the poor, a high percentage of whom we, the ANC, have created on our watch because of inappropriate policy options and misgovernance. You then said that the ANC should apologize to the nation for the July insurrection. Can you explain your thinking and why you are arguing for that apology?
Yes, the incidents in July, the sabotage and the resulting mayhem were entirely of the making of the African National Congress. For the longest time, there has been a group of people within the ANC who call themselves the Radical Economic Transformation adherents, who link that to Jacob Zuma, and who thought that once Jacob Zuma was put in jail, they should protest by taking certain kinds of action. It has been very clear, this thing has been simmering for a very long time within the African National Congress. These are people who are, some of whom are in the highest organ of the African National Congress, namely the National Executive Committee. They are self-declared. There is no need for anybody to try and find out who they are. They always say they belong to this, they think that the economy should be radically transformed in the manner that they say. And they thought arresting Jacob Zuma has nothing to do with the things that he did, breaches of the law. It all had to do with the fact that he was a proponent, a representative of this radical economic transformation. So that has been allowed to simmer within the African National Congress for quite some time. And people have, over time, from February already, just to count the latest incidents, you had people who are called MKMVA. I think people in this meeting probably know what all this is. Condoleezza Military Veterans Association. This is an organization that was set up to assist military veterans, none of whom, by the way, is still a soldier. They're retired. Quite a number of them are in bad shape. And so there was a need, indeed, to have a welfare organization that would assist in bringing them to making life livable for them. Mind you, also the Parliament, I think in 2009, recognizing that there were people from all formations that were involved in the struggle for and against, set up a department called the Department of Military Veterans, which was supposed to hand out some assistance to these people. It's defined what their entitlements were. But this group of people has been, for the past few years, few is more than 5, been busying itself with a political agenda. It just came into and forgot everything about what they were set up to do. And they are, I'm afraid, led by people who are extremely shady. You know, you couldn't understand how people with the reputations that they have would be allowed by the African National Congress to take such prominent positions and take such a course of action using the vehicle of Umkhonto we Sizwe. I wrote at a certain time and said that if there is one institution that has disgraced the proud name of Umkhonto we Sizwe, whatever the achievements, by the way, it was very difficult fighting for freedom here. We did not always have success. But if there is one group of people who, with the blessing or the tacit approval of the ANC, came and harassed the public, wore uniforms, and made very threatening statements against everybody, and they just said helplessly. So when Zuma was arrested, they made it very clear that they would go to Mganza and defend Zuma and make sure that nobody picked him up. That, of course, they were joined by Zuma's son, who is not always sober, but also Zuma's children. You know, everything is happening. It's ANC people, and the ANC is completely hopeless to do anything about its people making these provocative, belligerent statements threatening law enforcement agencies. So when the rupture happened, the spark clearly was lit by ANC people, whom the ANC, if you wanted to be very kind to us, was unable to rein in, but this spilled out into the public, and we got what we got. Had we been able to manage this thing and keep it internal, we would not have had what the mayhem that happened in KZN and to some extent in Gauteng as well. It is the ANC, the crisis spilling out into the public and claiming a lot of innocent victims in the process.
Are you confident that the ringleaders will be arrested? Some people think that there's going to be a phase 2 of this trouble. How confident are you that we're out of this now?
I am not sure, to be honest with you. I was a little discouraged by when I got reports that 12 people had been arrested, and you didn't quite seem to know who their names were. And then there was this public fight about what information is available to the president, to the ANC, to the public. And I began to wonder how much on top of the situation the government is seeing as there are people who are clearly known to have claimed that if Zuma was put in prison, they would do something. Something has been done. They would be the first object of any investigation. We also have these people. We've seen people and seen in WhatsApp groups that people were saying, let's plan to do this. We are ANC members, self-declared, you know. So I am not quite sure that with some of the things, some of the information that already is in the public domain. I mean, the Daily Maverick published some really very revealing, information about who was doing what in connection with this. One would have thought that apart from arresting the people who were looting and doing other things, these people are closest to the source of the problem and they should be arrested. I do not know whether, my impression was that they've gone underground. This thing of theirs has gone awfully awry. But this is assuming that these are people with a soul who would be bothered that innocent people have been killed. But yeah, I don't know where they are, and I don't know what they're capable of doing. I'm not quite sure how our state security agencies, how the police, how well positioned they are to deal with anything should it come up. I don't know that.
Let me turn to a different topic, also one that you've written about, and it's not a topic that's often talked about all that easily in South Africa. So let's talk a bit about tribalism, which you have said you're a man from Natal originally, and you're of Zulu origin. Do you think the president was right to talk about an ethnic mobilization? Do you worry about the issues of tribalism in South Africa? And let me stop there, and then I'll ask my next question.
Yes, I have every reason. Everybody who lives in this place should be worried that we haven't really doused the flames of tribalism. We all know what happened in Vuwani, where schools were set alight, I think simply because people didn't want that to move to a place that was thought to be from another ethnic group and so on. And there are just too many instances. But I was addressing myself in particular to the ethnic tendencies that I was seeing in the African National Congress. People were extremely progressive, quite senior, talking about minorities, referring to their comrades. And I thought, wait a minute, minorities, when what happens? I thought a very great move had been taken by the people who struggled against apartheid from inside the country, Mass Democratic Movement, the UDF, who decided to define everybody who was not liked by the apartheid regime, who was not white, not that they liked all white people, they called them black. So I thought that was such a wonderful and accurate description of the victims, the targets of apartheid repression, and that we were then going to come together and act as one, black people. You could be black too. I think you are black too, Ann. So, you know, that's the idea, to think that Ann might not quite qualify to be an SG of the ANC if she was a member and she was high-ranking, but not because she was not black like Mavuso, was something that was a bit of a shocker. I mean, we discussed with the people, and it seemed as if there is a scale, a graduation scale, as to who could take what position because of the color of their skin. Now, I think the important thing about this is that we recognize, I think we should discard all these apartheid kind of classifications of people. I do know that it's helpful at certain times when you want to check progress on improvements that have been made since liberation. But that's the extent to which we should be referring to these things. People have really called for a number of important personalities and said, look, let's use perhaps class as a mechanism, if you were to, as a mechanism, as a tool for assisting people who need assistance. Let's say the poor who need water. You're not going to check whether they are black like me or black like somebody else, or less black and so on, but the extent of their need, it is ridiculous to think that because some group by the design of the apartheid government, for reasons that they understood best, were oppressed more than others. And we can analyze this and explain these things, should therefore be entitled to more assistance or more priority assistance. So it's that kind of, it was in that context that I was really very, very worried about ethnicity within the organizations. You are not going to get, let's say, a Trevor Manuel to become a president. Somebody has said he's wonderful, but not at this stage. Can he? Why? Because he's colored. Well, I was in exile where we had people go to Wanki in Zimbabwe. Some of them were what people describe as colored. One died. If he was good enough to die for that, why couldn't be good enough to become a president or anything that's important in the ANC? That's the muddled thinking that I have a problem with. even Jesse Duarte, the Assistant Secretary General, at one time had cause to say at a meeting in Soweto that we are now beset with tribalism and ethnicity.
That's a really interesting answer. I was expecting you to deal a bit more, in addition, with the situation in Natal and whether you, I don't know, how you think about this, and was there ethnic mobilization? How do you see this situation? How would you describe it in terms of Zulus? Some people are talking about Zulus. How would you see this?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you still see me?
Yes, no, it's fine.
Oh,
Perfect.
fantastic. Because something has covered me here on my side.
Ah.
Okay, no thanks. Yes, the president talked about ethnic mobilization and then changed and reversed himself. I'm not sure that the people who plotted together, I think what brought them together was that they were calling themselves RET. Many of them are people who have got records that are not really records that you can be proud of. So there was nothing in the action of the primers of the problem, as I understand it, that was ethnic. But it is a fact that Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi had cause to step in when a number of people who guard the Zulu king suddenly moved to Nkandla, and he said, listen, there is a problem that's the issues that have nothing to do with you. And if you continue getting yourselves involved in this kind of thing, that's just an ethnic involvement, nothing to do with the people of Nkandla, with Jacob Zuma, etc., etc. So you know, also in Gauteng, the areas that were affected by some of the turmoil had actually, the hostels, which were visited by a man who has been, I don't know the names of some of these guys, who has since been released, but he was thought to be a plotter. Those were Zulu areas. So I don't know how this thing should be categorized, but the fact of the matter is simply that we we have been dealing with. Well, I don't know. Let me say, I think the plotters were not necessarily from, let's say, Zulu background, if you think about Jacob Zuma, but you did have people who supported Zuma because they were saying that he came from the Zulu area. Zuma, of course, is not a stranger to these kinds of things. When he was elected and elected by a vast majority in Bulugwana in 2007, there were people, pacing up and down the conference floor and the aisles and wearing T-shirts which said 100% Zulu boy. I don't know if, in fact, there is anybody who would even made written emails of that nature. Why would it be so important that people would say, yes, I am a Zulu, I am going to. So I don't know. Yeah, that's my answer.
Wow. Difficult issues. Let's turn to another difficult issue. Do you think the ANC has done enough to root out corruption in the organization and also in the state in the past three and a half years of President Ramaphosa's rule? How do you see this?
That's a difficult one, Ann. We're still living in the shadow of the 9 wasted years, as they are called. People say 9 wasted years. I think these were 9 devastating years. Wasted means an opportunity cost, but these were years of devastation when there was a hollowing out of state-owned organizations, of criminal justice organizations, departments, of the municipalities, of parliament, even of the ANC itself. These institutions were shaken very strongly. Not an easy thing to reverse. So doing enough when you're dealing with a situation of this nature is not an easy thing. I would venture to say that the president has intervened fairly decisively in certain instances, especially in the early years. You know, we now have credible heads of the NPA, of SARS. I think the SIU too. They are being led by people who are credible, and again they have to start from a very difficult low base to turn things around. So with all these things happening, you still had a government to run with extremely difficult social problems, with an economy that had been seriously wrecked. So it's not easy. I would applaud him, the president and the ANC, for addressing these issues that I've just referred to, because we are now at least beginning to see some activity. Clearly, the SIU, the counter-corruption unit there, seems to be working very well. Pato here, Madam, is doing a good job under very difficult conditions. It's not been easy, so it's not going to be enough, easily enough. But I think some efforts have been made. A lot more could be done. Some of the things have to do with leadership, which would sort things out in the area of corruption. Well, the fact that we still have senior people in the cabinet on the NEC being caught in acts of corruption. It also, you know, for all the things, the corruption cases that have taken place, you aren't seeing anybody going to prison yet. It could be explained perhaps by the difficulties that the hollowing out of the criminal justice institutions. But it is a bit discouraging, and I think that's part of what makes people wonder whether the ANC is paying serious attention to the fight against corruption.
Is there anything at the top of your list that you would like to have seen already, or would like to the government to prioritize on the fight against corruption, or in the ANC as well?
Yeah, I think we are facing a situation where, you know, the aftermath of the destruction that took place in KZN and in Gauteng really requires to be resolved. We still don't know, the public, I'm very much a part of the public, who did what. That's a matter that requires really urgent attention, very serious attention. People have said, for instance, there must be a commission. I know people are commissions fatigued, but I think there is a need to find out exactly what happened. Who does the investigation is going to have to be determined by who is most competent to get the results. That's one of the things. The less one talks about what the president should do, the better I always think it would be, because if you keep on telling me what to do, I might end up just not doing it. But there is a sense of impunity. You know, there are things that are happening in the public that are not terribly encouraging to the public at large. You know, I've got senior people giving contradictory statements about what happened, who had what information and who didn't give it, and all of that. So one would expect, let's be diplomatic here, I think I'm known for that, the president to really, in good time, and the good time is around now, I reassure the public that he is in control of the party as much as he is in control of the country, and deal with the things that do not require state to intervene, but things that can be resolved within the ANC. You can't have somebody who's been suspended from the ANC, the terms of the suspension being that they should not participate in meetings or get in contact, and they do that. You can't have people embracing those kinds of people and saying and supporting public, and there are no consequences. I think this is what is demoralizing very many people, and the sooner this matter is addressed, the better. You know, the unity that the president so desires, and it is important to have unity, absolutely essential, but it's not going to be forged with people who are thugs or thieves or people who are involved in corruption. Sooner than later, the Corruption Commission or whoever must determine that certain individuals should not be in the ANC, following the correct process. But you can't, you know, talk about counter-revolutionaries. It seems to me that there is no revolutionary behavior to counter at this stage. You know, people must get back to the program of addressing the issues and addressing them with a lot of urgency, the issues of the poor.
Very difficult situation. It's hard to know who to trust in this situation. Let me turn to the NPA, which you've already mentioned, but let's talk a little bit about it. We clearly have a new head of it, who the president appointed and got rid of, I like your term, the destructive years, people from the destructive period. So we have new leadership there. Do you think the government has given it enough funding? Has the organization really turned the corner? Do they have the right priorities and strategy? And I suppose for most South Africans, the big question is, why is it all taking so long? And as you said, nobody is yet in jail when clearly so much has been stolen. How do you see the NPA?
I think part of their problem, really, I mean, having managed at a similar level, and in a country whose human resources culture is strongly protective of human rights, let me put it like that. And you know, I think Madam Patohi had to deal with the material that she had, some of whom did not leave the organization, bad eggs, but without evidence, you can't move them out. So you've got to import people and get them to do what needs to be done. I don't know whether she's been given enough resourcing, but I think the sheer volume of work that needs to be done and the time it takes to charge people and work in conjunction with the police, of course, these things do need to be coordinated. It's important. I don't really want to sound like I'm defending the institution. I don't know anybody there, including herself. But when you prepare a case against people of this nature, you really want to be as close as possible to 100% certain that you're going to win, because you can imagine how demoralizing it is to charge a big fish that you know is corrupt, but they escape on a technicality, on technicalities. So the NPA, I think, has a tough job on their hands. I don't know how well. I'm part of the frustrated people. I really wish a lot of people were behind bars already, but I guess they have to follow due process and coordinate accordingly.
Let's stay with the issue of corruption and turn to the private sector. I think many people, myself included, were shocked at how many private companies got involved in facilitating or participating in some of the terrible things that have happened in South Africa. Do you think is the private sector doing enough? Clearly, the state has to charge people who are guilty, or who they have kind of allegations against. But do you think the private sector has done enough about dealing with corruption in its ranks? And what can they do? Is there something more they could be doing? How do you see this? Because clearly there were certain individuals and certain companies were also a party to this terrible looting of public money.
There is absolutely no doubt about the complicity of the private sector in corruption in South Africa. Sometimes not directly, by facilitating. I can never understand. I don't think we should have too much track to do with organizations, companies like Bain, like McKinsey, Trillion, Bosasa, if they still exist, and so on. Organizations that actually participated very actively using public sector people to loot the state. I really just think that the government should take a very strong position about continuing to deal with them. I think some of the things we should be demanding, what more can be done. It's important that if they are repentant and they are genuine in saying that they regret what they did, it's important that they put this corruption in their annual reports and report, what happened during the years. I don't also understand how the banks, financial institutions, but the banks really were not aware of the movement of funds externalizing by the Guptas for as long as they kept quiet. When did they become aware that such a havoc was being wreaked by an organization, that had already been exposed in other quarters as corrupt? It'd be really nice to look at that and find out. So the private sector, I have to say, we wouldn't have too much. There would be no corruption in the public sector, nothing significant, if it wasn't abetted by the private sector. They are always the ones who have the resources, the funds, who have the interest in getting more money. So their complicity really is beyond doubt. Absolutely is. And I think, as I say, what more can be done? It is important. The state is not just human beings. Let's forgive now. It's important to thoroughly investigate what happened and then make a decision based on that as to how you go forward with that. And it'd be nice for members of the private sector, these institutions that we're talking about, if really they were could be big enough to admit to their wrongdoing in the destruction of the state to the extent that it has been.
Of course, some did, but clearly not enough. I would agree with you. Mavuso, you're chairman of Corruption Watch, an organization devoted to looking at corruption and doing something about it in civil society, very important role. What have you learned about corruption that you didn't know before, or that you think we should know, that Corruption Watch has learned and exposed? Anything that you would like to share with us that really struck you in focusing more intensely on how to deal with corruption in a society like ours?
And you would be amazed, the people who are in this meeting, when you talk about corruption, think about the Guptas, about Transnet, ESCOM, and all the baddies that are very much in the public, that are talked about in public all the time. And that's as it should be, of course. But to the ordinary person, the people who come to report corruption to Corruption Watch, you get to know about a person who needs to get to a hospital to get in a non-fee paying hospital, having to pay a bribe in order to get this medication. You get a policeman who's supposed to apprehend drug addicts, getting some money from these, from drug smugglers and so on, getting money from these people. School, waiting in the queues, housing, and you wait endlessly. You've got Home Affairs allowing people who are undocumented to come in, those who are inside to go back in. It's just amazing how we all ended up, tearing each other when corruption is really mega. It's maybe petty, but it's as disastrous to the people who are affected as the grand corruption is to the rest of society. So yes, it's many people tell us that they believe that the most corrupt institution are the police, and these are the people who are supposed to protect them. These are people who must, to whom they must report crimes. So it's bad right through. So I learned that when I got to Corruption Watch, we get reports, I think 3,400 reports on corruption since 2012. And this year alone, over 200 reports that have come to Corruption Watch from these smaller cases that many people are not aware of. So it's pervasive, and it demoralizes the people, and they lose confidence, lose trust in government, because although we're describing it as small-time corruption, those fees that you pay in order to get a driving license go right up to the person who ultimately gives you the license. Everybody must be greased, it's very bad.
Yeah. Yes, I don't follow everything the organization does, but I was certainly shocked at how many cases were being reported from the education sector, which is really just terrible. Let me move on. We can go on about this. I want to talk to you about cadre deployment. Now, there's been some debate on this. COSATU has said it should go. Some people in the alliance and the ANC say it facilitates corruption. One senior ANC person has said cadre deployment was all about transformation, and that's been achieved in the civil service. The numbers demonstrate that. The president, however, told the Zondo Commission that cadre deployment was something that was here to stay. So what is your view on this? And is it really possible to fight corruption and maintain the ANC's approach to cadre deployment?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Okay, rephrase it if you like.
No problem at all. I'll tackle it. I'll try my best to deal with it. Number one, cadre deployment. I think the intention was good, but it just got off to a really bad start. There are lots. The intention was to build a strong, capable state, get the best of your people selected in a particular manner and placed in a particular manner that was not invasive to the system, that didn't encroach this public service system, and put them in there so that they provided not just the expertise which they needed to have, but also the commitment, almost that zeal to get things done, things transformational, etc., etc. That was the intention. I also tried to find out what other countries do something similar to cadre deployment. Not many. I do know from my experience with the national parks, South African national parks, my counterpart told me that he was going to have to leave office, American counterpart, I'm sorry, because the Republicans had won. So all top civil service servants, certainly in his department and other departments of state, go away with the political party that would have put them in position, I guess, under certain kinds of preparation with the aim of achieving the undoubted commitment, fulfillment of their programs. I don't know. I really can't defend this. And China, by the way, before the British civil service came into being, was one country that used meritocracy to using its own people to place them in government. But then, of course, China is a one-party state. I think cadre deployment has been a disaster. It has created very many things. The tenderpreneurs are happening, I think, because the ANC had no money, and people said, we are here. This is BE, mind you, but how you get these tenders in spite of people from who are ANC based being in power, that just seemed to exacerbate corruption. It hasn't been helpful. Certainly, I'm not aware demonstrably how it may have demonstrably assisted the state. The first tier of DGs, for instance, directors general, were a really good brand of people. I think they were put in place there. They had a political background, and they were not pushed around by their ministers, who were still their superiors. But with the passing of time, things also changed in the management. This issue of deploying people from outside to go and run government, I just don't see that it has helped anything at all. You know, you have a situation, for instance, where if the minister is not really strong, perfect, if somebody wishes to have a person placed in a particular department, that minister will either accept that, because these rules have not been well defined. I don't know how anybody sitting in the SG's office and interviewing people and with really no mechanisms for determining, for being able to assess the capabilities of people, would suddenly recommend to the government that things should be done. Also, I am almost resentful of it myself, in that you must get the best from the population, the best people on merit after a competition, and place them in the civil service, and they must be accountable to the government and not to a party. If the party is in government, that's fine, but the people serve the nation as a whole, and you must get the best from what's available in the country. and so good that they should be able to serve in a number of areas within government. I think they should be interviewed in a manner that is different from what's going on today by people who are equipped, who are skilled to do interviews based on the skills requirements that these people have, are meant to fulfill.
And when you were the DG of Home Affairs, were you under pressure to appoint certain people, or were you able to follow the kind of professional procedures you're describing?
It's very difficult. Yeah.
You can always say no, you don't want to answer.
Yeah. I worked very well with one minister, and I didn't work well at all with another. And part of the problem is exactly what you were saying. As a DG, I wasn't going to be telling people that, sorry, it's not me. It's the minister who's appointed this one. So I think it was just good for me to cut out and go. No, there has been abuse. I mean, absolutely. But maybe let's leave it at that.
Okay, great. I hear what you're saying. I'm sorry, I only have difficult questions for you because it's rare one has an opportunity to talk to somebody with your long experience in the movement and the ANC who's prepared to talk out frankly about these issues. So let me turn to the ANC and state capture. One of the most puzzling things for me is that the ANC knew about the Guptas and state capture in 2011. We know that from the president in his evidence to the Zondo Commission. We know it from Fikile Mbalula and from Trevor Manuel. And yet, according to the president, they only decided to do something serious about what was going on in 2016 when the voters started turning away from the ANC. And so the question I want to explore, if you're happy to do that, is, do you think there was more that senior people in the ANC could have done in that period from 2011 to 2016 when it was known that the Guptas were playing an extraordinary role? Do you think the NEC could have done more, the cabinet ministers, perhaps the veterans? Could people have spoken out more? I'm an outsider to this. So how do you see this issue?
Well, I have no doubt that they should have, we should have. Certainly the NEC, as I always contend, is elected at conference, never mind the problems we have with conference delegates for now. But they are the topmost organ of the organization in between conferences. And so they are fully empowered to make decisions, either through the National Working Committee and or the NEC itself. People were aware of the Gupta corruption. It was just too obvious for anybody not to be aware of it. Why did the people not talk? It's before I even forget, I need to say there was always a group of people in these structures who fought and fought hard for the right decisions to be made, who challenged the Guptas, since we're talking about them. They would end up losing their jobs, and they didn't mind that. But it would be really unfair to paint everybody.
Some very brave people.
Yeah, they really, really were. I think the public knows their names and so on. And losing jobs, and they didn't care in cabinet and so on, simply because they took positions that frustrated. I mean, if you look at PG, what's his name, Pravin Gordhan, for instance. I mean, he was removed from National Treasury, from being the Minister of Finance, simply because he just wasn't going to allow crazy people to come into National Treasury and mess things up. So that's one area, by the way. that was saved from the Guptas, thanks to people like that. I think we know of other people in the National Executive Committee who really stood their ground, spoke out, and I think, unfortunately, they were in the minority. So Zuma continued. Zuma was feared, I don't know, almost like a demigod. I wish there could be a system in which, if you're a member of the National Executive Committee, I suppose people want these jobs. You know, once as president of the country, he appoints ministers, and some of the ministers are drawn from the National Executive Committee. So, you know, when you have people who are not very certain about you know, people who talk about politics of the stomach, you don't want to upset your boss, because this comrade has suddenly become a boss who can fire you if you disagreed with him much too much. And we have examples of that. So I think this is what compromised some of the people, whether because they were in cabinet or in other senior positions, talking against the Zuma crimes, because that's really what they were, became anathema for people who just thought it's too perilous to do that, because maybe they didn't have options of jobs elsewhere. But you also had people who joined, you know, if you can't beat them, you join them. We are seeing now how many people, not by factional affiliation, have been involved in exactly what the whole nation decried Zuma for, and got him out of government. We just had so many people who became corruptible and could therefore not have the moral authority or the courage to stand up and denounce others who were doing some wrongdoing. You know, that saying for people like that, you point a finger at me and you must know that 5 others are pointing at you. I think that kind of thing. That's what really weakened the organization. There were moments of brilliance. At one time, the NEC, I think, forced the issue and said, everybody who is tainted, maybe stronger than that, who has been charged or mentioned in a particular way, corrupt, in association with corruption, draw up a list of those things. I'm giving you public information because I only get my information publicly, and get the list sent out to the provinces and ask the people to find out who is facing this kind of charges. It was the NEC which asked for that. I must say that the top officials really just did not respond as would have been expected, because they just, I think when you are going to get this information going to the Secretary General's office, couldn't have been terribly keen to pursue things of this nature. But they pressed on, qualified as it is being qualified now, was because people inside that National Executive Committee were conscientious enough to demand change. But the majority of the people certainly either sat on the fence or joined the administration of Zuma.
Right. I'm going to ask my last very big but quick question, which is, we've got very little time left. You know the ANC, you've been a member almost your entire adult life, as I understand. What do you think the odds are on redeeming this organization, or is it inevitable decline? 60-40, 50-50, or not possible? What would you say if you're prepared to?
You know, I wouldn't still be in the ANC if I didn't think that it's redeemable. But that's not to say it would be a it will be a very steep
oh dear.
hill, mountain to climb. I'm reminded of my friend who used to say, do you know what an optimist is? And I said, yes, what is an optimist? He said, it's a person who is not familiar with reality. So I don't know whether I am in that boat. The reality may be different than my hopes. I do think that for its own sake, even if the ANC were to leave government, it carries so much history. It's such a good institution founded by many ordinary people who are not Mandelas or Zulus and so on, that maybe sitting away in the opposition benches, if the electorate decides that they've had enough of the ANC, it would still be worth saving it.
Well, Mavuso Msimang, thank you very much for the time you've given us, for the frank, informed, and very thoughtful views you've shared today. We really appreciate them. Thank you very much indeed. It's been a fascinating conversation, and we really appreciate your frankness. So we've come to the end of our time. Sorry.
No, I was just saying thank you very much for inviting me. Thanks very much. And thanks to the people who participated in the meeting.
No, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you found this as thought-provoking and interesting as I did. And this meeting is now over. This conversation is now over. Thank you very much to Mavuso Msimang.